Hello Pokemon trainers, welcome back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket video here on iStarly TV. So I'm recording this a little later, but we just had a pretty big tournament hosted by a couple community members, a couple of I think pretty popular streamers. I think Jeff Hoogland and Spraggles, if you're familiar with them. They hosted what they called the Hooglandia and Spraggles Open. I think they said there was over 1,000 people participating in the tournament, and the tournament has just finished. The winner of the tournament was, I believe, a Japanese player playing a Darkrai Magnezone deck. So, if you'll notice, let's actually take a look at a couple of these. If you look right there, I have this open on the screen right here. Top 8. What would that be right there? 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry. Yeah, the top 8. If you look at the top 8 decks there, one of them is not a Darkrai deck. Only one of them. And then only 2 of them are not Darkrai Magnezone. So you can kind of see what's going on here in the meta. Darkrai Magnezone is looking like the new best deck. I did watch a good amount of the tournament. I did watch the finish of the tournament as well. I didn't watch like every single game, but I watched, again, a good amount of it, and I did catch the final like top 4 games. This deck is very, very powerful. So here's the deck list right here. And I know it kind of looks weird because this was my thought when I first saw kind of like this deck emerge as like a really powerful deck in the meta. Thinking about pairing Darkrai and Magnezone seems kind of weird, right? Because Magnezone, if you take a look at it, requires electric energy. Really, it only requires 1 electric energy, and Darkrai requires dark energy. And Darkrai's really, really powerful ability, Nightmare Aura, only triggers if you put a dark energy on Darkrai from your energy zone. So you might be asking like, oh, well, how does that work? If one of them is an electric Pokemon, one of them is a dark Pokemon, the answer is Magneton right here. If you take a look at Magneton's ability, Volt Charge, you can basically put electric energy onto Magnezone for free every turn. And so the way that this works is you have Darkrai in play. Really, there are turns where you can put so you only have dark energy in your deck, that's it. And then there are turns where you can put the dark energy on Darkrai and start doing damage to the enemy because of Darkrai's ability. And then you can also, in that turn, use Magneton's ability to put an electric energy onto Magneton for free. And then you just do that, for a couple of turns until your Magneton has 3 energy on it, at which point you can evolve it into Magnezone, and Magnezone does 110 damage, which is a lot of damage. It doesn't kill, really, I don't think it one-shots any EX Pokemon by itself. But of course, you're playing Darkrai in this deck, and Darkrai can do 20 damage basically for free. So you basically have about, it's not even 130 damage. Like, over the course of several turns, it's just like a lot of damage, right? You have 110 burst damage from Magnezone, and then like every turn you have this chip damage from Darkrai that you can just rack up. Of course, as you would expect, the opponent or the player is also playing Druddigon in their deck. I think this particular person, the person who ended up winning the tournament, was a little bit of an outlier. They're playing a copy of Kangaskhan in the deck, which I really like. And I also, again, I watched the tournament. Kangaskhan is just, it kind of looks inferior to Druddigon because they both have 100 HP. And Kangaskhan, usually with both of these, you just want to sit back and put the energy on your Darkrai and your Magnezone. So you might think like, why would you play Kangaskhan? But Kangaskhan is capable of doing damage by itself, so it has a little bit more agency than Druddigon. 30 damage, on average it's doing about 30 damage. 30 damage is not a lot, but again, with the 20 damage from Darkrai and then the 110 burst damage from Magnezone, it adds up really quickly. And sometimes you'll get lucky. I did see a game where a Kangaskhan got really lucky. They got 2 heads and they were able to knock out an enemy Magnemite before it was able to evolve. So, really there's a lot of, I was going to say there's a lot of freedom with how you build this deck. That's not exactly true. You definitely want 2 of each of the Magnezone evolutionary line. 2 Darkrai's, of course, because Darkrai is just so good. And then you probably want 2 Druddigon, but you could make the flex case and play Druddigon or Kangaskhan. Another Pokemon that I've been interested in, I don't think it's great in this deck, It might be, but Spiritomb. Spiritomb can do 10 damage to everything, and it only requires 1 colorless energy. Another super clutch card is Cyrus. This is a new card. This with Darkrai can just guarantee like that you win some games. Of course, Darkrai only does 20 damage to the active Pokemon when you put energy on it. But there are situations, of course, where like you do damage to their really powerful Pokemon. With Darkrai, you put some damage on it, and then they retreat because they don't want it to get knocked out. And then later in the game, you just Cyrus it back into play and knock them out with Magnezone. And I saw a lot of games in the tournament where players got the kill because of Cyrus, because they had dealt some chip damage with Darkrai early. So again, if you want to take a look, I will post a link to this in the description, this entire tournament. When you go to this page, you can just go to standings up here. And then from there, you can just look at, these are all of the combined, I think, of course, is like the total record. And then you can go to Top Cut. I think Top Cut is like the top 8 players. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And again, there is a lot of Darkrai, Magnezone. I mean, if you look at like the top 16, top 20, top 32, there's not quite as much Darkrai. But the fact that the Darkrai decks rose to the top and are dominating the top 8 of this tournament is something you need to keep in mind. Now, you know, when Mewtwo EX emerged in the first format, when Druddigon Gyarados emerged in Mythical Island, you know, a lot of people have this reaction like the sky is falling. You know, I'm trying to be a little more patient with something like that. I mean, to be honest, I would not enjoy playing against a lot of Darkrai decks just because they are so strong. But just keep that in mind, like, there might be ways to counter this. We're not sure yet. I mean, one thing about this deck, though, of course, you never want to attack Druddigon. Druddigon feels so bad. Honestly, I like this card personally. I know it's a favorite of mine from the early set, but it's kind of a nightmare to play against. I mean, I guess Darkrai kind of gets around it because you can put damage on Druddigon with your Darkrai without attacking Druddigon, and then eventually rack up enough damage to knock it out. But man, it doesn't feel fun to play. I have not played against this deck yet, but I imagine it's going to be everywhere online. I'll probably try it out myself, but I mean, it's not going to be one of my favorite decks. Like, just kind of playing against it, they're just going to be sitting back, building up their board. And the insane thing about Darkrai is they can build up their bench while doing damage with Darkrai. So that's just like... And then if you ever try to attack Druddigon, it just does too much damage back to you. Not fun, right? Let me know in the comments what you think of this, but I want to take a look at a couple of other decks. Again, like, the first deck that we see here that does not have Darkrai in it is this fighting deck, which is a really cool one. I actually saw a lot of fossil decks, and this is kind of a fossil deck as well, with Aerodactyl EX as, you know, the prime EX of the deck. They also have the Lucario card, which, you know, adds damage to your Pokemon, which is really good. And I like how they're playing... Oops. I mean, Marshadow's cool too, of course. I like how they're playing Hitmonchan instead of Hitmonlee. That's something I bet no one ever thought would happen. But, of course, what Hitmonchan does, very importantly, is it gets benefit from Lucario's ability. Lucario's ability does not boost the damage of Hitmonlee, which is why we're seeing less Hitmonlee. I still think Hitmonlee is playable and decent. You know, of course, Hitmonlee can destroy Magikarps before they evolve. It can two-shot Magnemite before Magnemite evolves, but in most cases, I wouldn't rely on that because they're just going to evolve it eventually, right? But it could matter, right? And Hitmonlee with Cyrus is also a nice combo. Now, of course, they're not playing Hitmonlee, but just something to think about. Another card that's looking interesting is Giant Cape. Just deciding when and where to put this index, I think, is going to be important. So let's see if we can take a look at the meta game. I think, yeah, this is what we want to look at right here. So here is the metagame snapshot, at least for this tournament. Now, of course, I think TCG Pocket is pretty volatile, and I actually think a lot of decks can do well. Like, if you practice with a deck and you're aware of what decks exist in the meta, you can definitely prepare and like do well with almost anything. Now, some stuff to look at. Is there a way to like sort it? I'm not sure there. Oh, yeah, there is. Oh, well, that's not super reliable though, because this deck has a 100% win rate, but it only had one game, right? So it's like, that's not super reliable. Oops, how can I go back to, let me see if I can reset this somehow. But either way, if you saw right there, the Darkrai decks are right now these are sorted by the amount of people playing them. So 86 people played Darkrai Magnezone, 67 people played Weavile Darkrai, etc. And so if a deck has a super high win rate like this, like 64%, and it's the most played deck in the meta, that is a huge deal. 64% is insane when you're the most played deck in the format. So this is something that people, and you know, this is a pretty new set still, right? The set just came out a few days ago, so everyone's going to need to learn to adapt. And let me know in the comments what you think can beat this deck. You know, something I was going to talk about though is like Darkrai itself is weak to grass, but Magnezone is not. So I'm personally thinking, I mean, if you look at Executor Celebi, they had a 45% win rate. That is not very good, but you know, it could still, oh, and this is cool. It shows you like how many, like on average, how many copies of each card they played. I actually have a video coming out. I was going to post it today, but I decided to post this instead because this is more relevant. I have a video coming out where I'm showing a Celebi EX deck without Superior. So again, the fact that Superior requires you to have a stage 2 evolution, it's pretty rough in all honesty. So I'm trying a deck with Celebi that takes advantage of Celebi, but also doesn't really play Superior. So that maybe a deck like that can do some burst damage to the Darkrai decks. And you know, Celebi importantly does damage in chunks of 50. So if you get lucky and get a couple heads against a Druddigon, you can knock it out, which is important. It's possible you could, if you get lucky, you could knock out a Druddigon in one hit, but even knocking it out in 2 hits can be useful. And then Celebi, once you have like multiple energies on Celebi, you're doing a massive amount of damage to Darkrai, and you're pretty likely to be able to knock it out as well. Other decks that did well here, Yanmega, Dialga. If you look right here, they had a 55% win rate. That is pretty good. Darkrai Weezing, unsurprisingly, also did really well. It looks like it's the second best performing deck, but also the second best performing Darkrai deck. Starmie Palkia is also looking pretty decent. Something about this deck, the weakness of this deck is, I mean, Manaphy's a really good, Manaphy's a really good card, but the weakness of Manaphy is that 50 HP. So personally, I've played against this deck a few times, and to be fair, I was playing with my Skarmory deck, which does 50 damage in one hit. If they only get one activation of Oceanic Gift and then you knock them out, it's not that good, because then they only put one energy on each of their Pokemon, and then you already get a prize point. So then when they go into their EX, all you need to do is knock that out, and then you win the game, right? So that can be a little rough for the Manaphy deck. It's still a strong deck, don't get me wrong, but I personally have had success against it. I think it's easier to beat than like the other decks that we're talking about, the Darkrai decks. Let's go back a little bit here. What other decks did well here? Not very many, if I'm being honest. Articuno Palkia did okay, but it doesn't have a big share. Not a lot of people played it, though it did have a 55% win rate. So once again, like, if only 8 people played it, like, the win rate is not going to be as, like, impactful, because even if it had, like, 100% win rate, I mean, that would probably be something worth talking about, but this deck right here had 10 times, almost 11 times more the amount of players, and it had a much higher win rate just by comparison. Other things to look at, Charizard Moltres has a 44% win rate, which means it looks like Charizard Moltres is struggling. Infernape Moltres looks like it has a clean 50% win rate towards the bottom of the page there, if you can see, which is okay. You know, I actually saw this deck play a little. Personally, I was feeling like Charizard Moltres feels a little bit better, but Infernape performed better, so who knows. Now here's the sad or happy thing, depending on who you ask. Mewtwo Gardevoir, 23% win rate. This used to be the clear best deck in the meta. Mewtwo Gardevoir is dead. It is dead. It can rise again, but at the moment, at least for this coming week, if you're going to be playing tournaments or you're just going to be playing for fun, just keep in mind, if you could still play it. I mean, if you're just playing random games online, go ahead and play this deck if you enjoy it. But just know that you're gonna lose some games because they're playing Darkrai. Yeah, so the best deck in the meta being a Darkrai deck, and really multiple versions of Darkrai being really good, does not bode well for Mewtwo at all. So yeah, I mean, let me know in the comments. I also saw a lot of fossil decks. Let me know in the comments, I was gonna say, what deck you would play against the Darkrai deck. again, Druddigon does some chip damage if you attack it. Darkrai does chip damage over time just by simply putting energies on it. And then they're building up. I mean, Darkrai itself can definitely attack. It does 80 damage, which is pretty respectable. But Magnezone is the main attacker. So really, even though Darkrai is not weak to fighting, I actually think fighting decks look like they could be in a decent position. And I did see a few fighting decks perform pretty well. Once again, the only non-Darkrai deck that got in the top 8 was a fighting deck. So maybe leveraging Lucario. I mean, I'm not certain about Aerodactyl. I don't know if Aerodactyl EX is exactly the way to go, but again, I think that there's something to be said here about ways to counter the Darkrai deck. I think that the Druddigon Gyarados deck, it just kind of seems a little too slow. I don't know, like it seems like too slow against the Darkrai deck. Although at the same time, you're both doing similar things. Like you're both putting Druddigon in the front and setting up your bench, right? I guess the difference there is that on the one hand, the Magnezone deck can attack a lot faster, which is pretty useful. On the other hand, though, the Gyarados deck does have Misty, which can sometimes get you there much quicker, so it's pretty volatile. Pikachu Pachirisu also did pretty badly if you look a little towards the bottom there. They got a 38% win rate. That is not very good at all. That is actually, no, that is bad. That is actively bad. Celebi Superior got 28%, although, again, if you look further up, Celebi Executor got 45, but that deck was also playing Superior, so it's kind of similar. Like I said, I'm going to be trying, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to try some Darkrai Weezing just because I love the Weezing deck, so I know that deck is going to get a lot better, and I have a couple ideas for other builds of Darkrai. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I like the Darkrai card myself. I want to play with it. It is very powerful. I know that when I'm playing random decks and I play against Darkrai, I'm going to be crying, but, you know, that's how things go, I suppose. I do want to try some Charizard and Moltres, even though it didn't perform well. Like, just the ability to... Again, Charizard is still the best thing at just blasting through enemies. Like, that's what Charizard does, is you set up the Charizard, and then you one-hit KO everything in the meta. With that being said, I did see a Bastiodon deck that did decently well. There weren't that many players playing it. Oh yeah, if you look here, Bastiodon Skarmory got 76%, so maybe that's where you want to look. And personally, I'm enjoying Skarmory, so maybe you do want to try some Skarmory builds. I think it's going to come down to like what Pokemon you're trying to use in this meta. And on the one hand, Stage 2 Pokemon are so volatile and so rough. But at the same time, like a lot of the best decks have Stage 2 Pokemon. Like Magnezone is Stage 2, Charizard is Stage 2. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many. Even in the fossil decks, Rampardos is Stage 2. So, I don't know. This is a really interesting situation to be in. Obviously, things are not looking good for the health of the meta when Darkrai is so dominant. But this was kind of like a breakout tournament for it. And now it's going to be on everyone's radar. Everyone's going to be trying to beat it. Maybe next week when we have other tournaments, we see people countering it. I don't know exactly how you do that, but I'm sure there are ways to do that. So anyways, thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like and please subscribe for more Pokemon TCG Pocket videos. Let me know in the comments what you think of this, what you think of Darkrai Magnezone, and are you going to play it? Are you going to build it? Are you going to try to beat it? Or are you just going to cross your fingers and hope you never see it on ranked and when you, or not ranked, but on the online battles? And when you do, you're going to either auto concede or cry. Let me know in the comments. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.